Google Maps is undoubtedly an awesome thing, and one of its most awesome features is Street View. Besides giving us the guess where I am on Google Maps game, it allows anyone to travel around the world without spending money or even knowing the joy of touching grass. But not all countries are created equal on Google Street View. In some, you can visit any small village on the outskirts of the country, but in other, you'll struggle to find anything. So today I'm gonna be tier listing countries based on how well their Street View coverage is. But before we start, I need to explain the tiers. Perfect. This is when basically every small village, every little nowhere real population, -1 can be seen on Google Maps. Great example of this is the US of A, where even all of the little fields in Idaho can be seen from every angle. Good. This is when country is still mostly visible, but some pretty big parts are missing. This is often the case for big empty countries with remote villages that are too hard to get to. An example of this is Argentina, where it's nearly perfect in the north, but the further south you go, the more and more gaps you see. Okay, here you can still do a tour of the place, but some parts are missing. Two entirely different examples are Ghana, which has some big cities well mapped, roads connecting them, but everything else is at best. Second example is South Korea, which has perfect coverage in the biggest city, but has pretty much nothing in most other parts. And those parts aren't countryside either. They include a giant chunk of Gwangju, 6th largest city in the country, and the entirety of Sejong, a planned city of 350,000, which is built as a new capital. A new capital without any street view. Bad. This is where you can't exactly make a tour of the country anymore, just some cities. An example of this is Myanmar, where we have okay-ish view of the biggest cities and a road, and that's basically it. Capital only. Well, pretty self-explanatory, you can only see the capital. Good example of this is Laos, where capital is covered well, but nothing else is. Also, this doesn't apply to states which are all capital, because it would be stupid to put Monaco here with its perfect coverage. Very bad. This time, there's not just the capital, but the street view is even worse somehow. For instance, there's Congo, where the only street view available is just one highway. And non-existent, literally no blue street view lines at all, or at least no street view where you can see stuff. For example, Mali, which to be fair has some street view. You don't see it? It's right here. In 2 historic mosques in one town. Yeah, this is what I mean by seeing stuff, so yeah, I don't count like museums and stuff. Well, without out of the way, let's begin. First up, let's get out of the way the two tiers that are easiest to define, perfect and non-existent. Before I started this video, I expected most of the Europe to be in the perfect tier, and that's pretty much turned out to be true. Andorra, Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Romania, Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, France, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Iceland, Italy, San Marino, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, Poland, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Slovenia, Slovakia, Spain, Sweden, Turkey and the UK are all covered perfectly. Andorra even has some street view of some hiking trails, which is really cool. Obviously, some of these have hard to traverse places like mountains of Norway and Austria and the center of Iceland, but I don't think anyone expects street view there since literally nobody lives in these places, so they don't impact the score. The only two countries I think I need to address further are Denmark and France, because when you think of France you probably think of this, and this territory is perfectly covered. But that's not the entirety of France, because it owns this thing called French Guiana, a giant overseas territory which has no street view at all. It barely even classifies for capital only. So, to not ruin France's score, I'm ranking these two separately. Denmark has the same thing with Greenland, but Greenland is actually also mostly covered, even having street view of the sea routes connecting villages, since there are not a lot of roads in Greenland. So on its own it would have gotten also a perfect score, or at least a good score anyways. Other countries that have a perfect score are Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, the USA, and the last ones are a bit complicated. You see, this is China, a country that moved all of the maps a few meters left from their actual location because it just doesn't trust Google. It gets a non-existent score for obvious reasons, and as I said, the coverage of museums doesn't count. But this is kind of not the only China. These two are Hong Kong and Macau. They are technically a part of China, but they have their own laws and currency, their citizens need to go through customs to get to China, and they also trust Google more, so they don't move their maps and actually have perfect street view coverage. Because of that, these two are ranked separately and they get a perfect score. And this, my viewers, is the Republic of China, also known as Taiwan. It's a completely separate country, which has the government of mainland China and actually claims the entirety of China. It also trusts Google to have Street View on its territory, and it also gets a perfect score. This is pretty much the first time complex political events affect Street View in this video, but not the last. Next up, I'll go through the countries that have no Google Street View, and here I need to address these trapped thingies. These aren't Street View. They're just photos connecting together, so I'm not counting this. With these evil things out of the way, countries with no Street View coverage are Afghanistan, Algeria, which has a lot of these photo things I talked about, Angola, the Bahamas, Belarus, Benin, Togo, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, People's Republic of China, which we already discussed, Comoros, DRC, Cuba, North Korea, Djibouti, Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Ethiopia, French Guyana, which was also discussed earlier, Gabon, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, Vatican, Kiribati, because of that now I can say London and Paris have no Street View, Libya, Madagascar, Malawi, Mali as mentioned at the beginning, Mauritania, Micronesia, Niger, Papua New Guinea. Yep, all of the Guineas have no Street View. Paraguay, Kosovo, Sierra Leone, Solomon Islands, Somalia, South Sudan, South Sudan, Suriname, Tajikistan, Syria, Timor-Leste, Turkmenistan, Tuvalu, Venezuela, Yemen and Zambia. Phew, quite a long list. Most of these countries are very poor, at war and or authoritarian. There are also a lot of island nations here, 11 actually, because it's hard to get a panorama car on an island, although I expected nearly all island nations to be here, and that's not the case actually. Some countries were kind of surprising for me, Egypt for instance. It has views of the pyramids, but I already established not counting museums. Besides that, it only has one street in Cairo and two in Alexandria, which just don't cut it for me. Another surprise was Vatican City, which I expected to have at least the square, hell, maybe even some gardens and museums, which actually would have counted here because the country is so small, basically all museums. But no, a whole lot of nothing. Another kind of surprising one was Venezuela, which I expected to at least have the capital, but nope. The only thing on Street View here is some slums for some weird reason. Now that I got the most objective tiers out of the way, let's go top to bottom through all other ones, while I give a small explanation for each country. Good tier. Germany. For a long time, it had one of the worst Street View in the European Union, but it recently got updated to get way more of it, but it still misses large chunks here and there. Canada gets worse the further north you go. Areas around major cities are well covered, but towns in the north are sadly left out. Argentina. It's similar to Canada, but it actually gets worse further south, missing some highways and villages here and there. Nothing too bad, but sadly doesn't let it get a perfect score. Uruguay misses many highways, a situation similar to Argentina. Chile has coverage problems in northern and easternmost parts of the country. Antigua and Barbuda. This was the first island country with good coverage, and I honestly was surprised how well it's covered because I thought that most island countries would have nothing. Still misses many suburbs though, so not perfect. Brazil, very well covered, for a place which doesn't even have roads in some remote areas, but still leaves a lot to be desired. Bangladesh, nearly perfect, but misses parts of the country and many places only have just the main roads. India is very similar to Bangladesh in the street view regard, but the missing chunks are bigger since the country is too. Also, I didn't notice this at first, but the coverage of the state of Manipur is awful, only having the capital, and the nearby state of Nagaland has nothing. Cambodia, good coverage of populated areas, but okay-ish of the rural ones. Cyprus. Here's another complicated political one. You see, besides just Cyprus, there's Northern Cyprus, which is only recognized by Turkey. And if just Cyprus has a good coverage of cities and a decent one in the countryside, Northern Cyprus has an okay-ish coverage of some towns and no street view in others. So to not dunk points from Cyprus for territory claimed but not controlled, Cyprus gets a good score and Northern Cyprus gets an okay score. Ecuador misses a lot in the east but pretty good everywhere else. Jordan only has street view in the west, but that's where most people live anyways, the east is just desert. Bhutan was a pleasant surprise. For a country as close as this, it has most towns, most big roads, so way better than I expected. Israel misses some highways and villages. South Africa misses parts in the rural areas, but big cities are very well covered. Lesotho has literally the same situation as South Africa. Senegal misses some places in the desert, but the desert is really inhospitable, so I think it's okay. Mexico once again misses chunks rural areas, familiar thing at this point. Montenegro, despite being very small, most villages only have main streets shown. Philippines misses some smaller islands, Qatar misses some villages, and what's surprising here is that this one has the best street view out of all Gulf states. Sri Lanka, same as India, and Switzerland was kind of a surprise. I thought this one would be perfect, but it sadly misses some resorts and villages, which knocked it down a bit. Still pretty good though. Okay tier. Eswatini, it's similar to Lesotho and South Africa, but misses more rural areas. Sao Tome and Principe, most of the southern Sao Tome and half of Principe are sadly missing. South Korea I already explained. Rwanda has perfect coverage in some places, but in others there are only some main roads or even nothing at all. Russia, the central parts here are missing some smaller towns, but the real problems start in the remote areas where there's just nothing. For instance, the infamous town of Norilsk is not on Street View, although it actually can have Street View because it has Street View on Yandex, which is a Russian search engine which also has maps. With some towns it's actually weird to understand why they are not even on the Street View, because Google covers 90% there. Most big cities are covered well though. Albania misses a big chunk of rural areas that are not on the main roads. Georgia, cities are covered in a really lackluster manner, leaving out some streets even in the capital. It also has a weird bug where Street View shows us these panorama things made by individual people, I don't know why. Indonesia, most populated provinces are perfectly covered, but some, like Papua, literally have nothing, even in the cities. Salvador basically only has big cities and connecting roads. Guatemala, some parts are really well covered, but some are missing, kinda like Rwanda. Peru misses the jungle area, which is literally half of the country, and chunks of the Andes. Colombia, it's kinda like Ecuador, but the eastern part here is way bigger, so that's why it's lower. Kazakhstan has most big cities and towns, connecting highways, but that's it. Botswana, most places outside capital only have main roads and street view, but most of the country is covered this way though. Ghana, similar to Botswana, main roads only, but it's even more partial. Bahrain, this was a complete disappointment. Despite being small, the only streets covered in all cities are just the main roads, leaving most of the city out of view. Also just gives up in the south. Barbados, good coverage of rural areas, but cities are done Bahrain style, main roads only. Northern Cyprus was already discussed. Palestine, Gaza has nothing for obvious reasons, and in the West Bank, some highways and towns, especially biblically important ones like Bethlehem and Jericho, have street view, but nothing else does. Serbia, very big parts of rural areas are missing, especially in the south, where just towns and highways. Kenya, good coverage in the southwest and in the city of Mombasa, but nothing everywhere else. Marshall Islands, two most populated islands have street view, others don't. North Macedonia has only biggest roads and cities. Mongolia, bad and pretty fragmentary coverage of rural areas, but perfect one in the capital, where now like 90% of the population lives, to be honest. Mauritius, the capital only has one street on street view, but the rural areas are covered pretty well, which is a unique situation where cities are covered worse than villages. Nigeria has good coverage of big and medium-sized cities, a lot of highways, but big parts are missing. Nigeria is kinda similar to Rwanda in this regard. Lebanon, half of it has good coverage, although half of the capital is just missing, but other half barely has anything. Panama, the further from the canal you go, the worse it gets. East of the country, for instance, only has street view on one road. Samoa, both of the capital and everything else has these ugly chunks which leave a lot out but also get a lot in. Seychelles, three biggest islands only have main roads, others have nothing. Trinidad and Tobago, all cities besides Port of Spain, the capital, are done Bahrain style, main roads only. Tobago literally has no street view and Trinidad still misses large chunks. Ukraine, I understand that the war stops street view in a lot of places, but even in the areas that are far away from the front lines, huge rural areas and a lot of villages are missing from the street view. UAE, another Gulf state disappointment. Some parts of Dubai are covered well, others are done Bahrain style. Abu Dhabi has nothing, only these photo things. Honestly, there are two things that surprised me here. First, how bad the street view in Gulf states is. I thought it would be better since they're rich. Second, I'm surprised how many tiny island nations, 1 in good and 7 in okay, have street view in large amounts. thought there wouldn't be any. With that, let's move on to bad tier. St. Lucia only has parts of cities and some roads. Bolivia only has biggest cities and connecting highways. Most of the country has nothing. St. Kitts and Nevis, both islands only have one highway going around the coast each. Vietnam, Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City are well covered. There's a highway connecting them with some towns on it, but it just stops a lot and everything else is missing. Kyrgyzstan, two biggest cities are covered okay-ish, but have gaps. There are also some highways, but that's basically it. Tunisia only has a street view on one coast, and even there, all cities have only the main roads. Armenia, the capital is covered very sparsely. More than half of it is left out. Everything else, only roads, and only bits of roads. Namibia, the country is covered in these ugly bits of highways, but cities get 3 to 4 roads at best. Even the capital is not covered all that well. Brunei mostly has these dumb photo things. Only 1 or 2 roads have actual street view. Azerbaijan, Bahrain style view of the capital city center, not even the outskirts. A few highways, that's it. Nepal, very partial view of the capital and some surrounding towns and highways. Fiji only has 2 cities and parts of the road going around the island. Dominican Republic, only 2 biggest cities and parts of the coast are present. Cape Verde, city center of the capital and some highway bits. Bosnia only has a few roads and a very partial view of the capital. Myanmar only has partial view of the 3 biggest cities and the connecting road, and also this place for some reason. Iran has Bahrain style views of some cities and bits of road in the northeast, and that's it. Saint Vincent and the Grenadines only has 1 connecting road on the biggest island. Saudi Arabia, some cities have only a few roads. Riyadh has bigger ones, barely any connecting highways. Uganda only has the capital, a national park, and the road connecting them. Capital only. Most of the countries here only have partial coverage of the capital, like a few main roads, and that's it. That's the case with Zimbabwe, Guyana, Maldives, and Mozambique. But there are some actually pretty interesting cases here. For instance, Cote d'Ivoire has coverage of the city of Abidjan, which is the biggest city, but isn't the capital, so I'll let it slide. Grenada has a highway to the airport, which is, I think, pretty important in a country as small as this. Laos is actually very well covered, but only in the capital for some reason. Kinda weird, because, as we saw, most of the countries that only have the capital have it partially. Liberia, for instance, has it partially, but it also has some highways. Nauru doesn't have a capital to speak of. Most of the government buildings are located in the village of Yaren, but it's not officially the capital. But this one village, which is not Yaren, it's a different one, is the only one with street view, so I guess Nauru goes here. Gambia has very good coverage of the capital and also the biggest city, which is right outside the capital. That's pretty nice surprise. Vanuatu has good coverage and some surrounding roads. That's it for the capital only. Let's move on to very bad. Congo has just 1 highway. Costa Rica has only really small bits here and there. Dominica has only 1 very small bit of road, basically 1 street in the capital. Belize also has only 1 highway. Kuwait has 1 highway and a few roads in the capital. Seriously, while Gulf states so bad at street view. Uzbekistan has very fragmented view in big cities and literally no roads. I honestly expected way more from it. I expected it to be better than Kyrgyzstan. Iraq, for some weird reason, there's good street view in the north, not even in the cities, only in these villages, and nowhere else. Basically everything you get in the other parts is maybe 1 or 2 streets in the cities. Jamaica has 2 small towns and a few roads. Liechtenstein, I was honestly really surprised to see that it has only 2 streets. I honestly thought it would be like San Marino or some other microstates. Morocco only has some streets in Casablanca and everything else is just photo things. Pakistan only has small bits of Karachi, Lahore and Islamabad. Oman, 1 highway in parts of the capital. Palau, 1 street in the biggest town and also has the same bag that's in Georgia. Moldova, some streets of the capital and this 1 town. Tonga, very small bits of capital and road. Tanzania literally got this tier and not non-existent because it has street on the island of Zanzibar and some near Kenya. Well, that's it. Hope that was interesting. So if so, please like, subscribe and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!